So maybe a conversation on that part after our call today with him.
So actually, to really tie into what Jade just asked, maybe just make it a question for all of us to hear the answer to in it as well, is why is it that we go from, like Jade's talking about there, she's with this avoidant, or let's just call it an unsafe relationship for someone who's not familiar with all the attachment styles. You're in this unsafe relationship and you're really trying to make things work. You're trying so hard because it's so unsafe. You're just scrambling, especially, as an anxious person or whatever, you're scrambling to make things work. And then later down the line, you're in a safe relationship and you start relaxing in it. It's almost like you're relaxing too much now. And you are going from this one extreme to the next in these different relationships, kind of like a little ping pong ball. So how do we get to a place where we aren't either being taken advantage of or being manipulated by our partner, or aren't taking advantage of and manipulating our partner, like on the flip side of that? Like, how do we get more centered? And why do we ping pong like that? Is we're just not doing our shadow work? Are we looking at our shit?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few different pieces to this, but I think, to answer your last question first, it's we do that in some ways. We ping pong back and forth because we think that the healing comes by opposition, right? So we think that if we experience being taken advantage of, and this isn't a conscious process, right? This is a very unconscious pattern. And it's because in many ways, your pain has its own intelligence. Your wounding has its own intelligence, but we're largely not aware of our pain and wounding. We try and disconnect from it often. And so we're in a relationship, we're wounded in it, we get cheated on, or, we're with this avoidant person and they ghost us continually. And we're constantly chasing after them and pursuing them. And we're like, oh, this is fucking painful and this sucks. And then the relationship ends, inevitably they leave us because they're like, you're too needy and I can't deal with this anymore. And then we find ourselves in another relationship. And what do we say to ourselves between those two relationships? I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to put myself in that position again. Whoop, pendulum swings to the other side, right? And suddenly we find ourselves in a position with this needy, clingy person that's constantly text bombing us and coming after us. And we're like, oh. And part of us is like, oh, this feels amazing. I am so safe. I'm so safe. I'm not doing that thing that got me hurt before. Good on me, pat on the back, here we go, right? A couple months go by and all of a sudden that person is agitating us and we find ourselves doing the same behavior that that previous partner did to us before. And so the real answer to all this is that we allow other people to abandon and neglect us because we are abandoning and neglecting ourselves. And it's the hard truth that we generally don't want to see in the moment. When we're allowing somebody else to treat us like that, it's because on some level we believe that that's what we deserve. And often it's a reflection of our relationship to ourselves. The original relationship, obviously you have your origin relationships with your parents and your family system, but the real relationship that always shows up in every single relationship you will ever have in your life is your relationship with yourself. And so if that relationship isn't right first, the rest are going to struggle. The rest are going to be challenging, because the truth is that everywhere you go, there you are. In every relationship, it is a manifestation of how you are showing up. And so if you're showing up in a relationship with somebody who is mistreating you, and you've allowed that to happen for years or in past relationships, it's because of the relationship with yourself that you think on some level that that's what you deserve. And that's a very hard thing for some of us to face, because sometimes we realize that, but then rather than working to heal that truth and integrate that pain, we use that as an opportunity to shit on ourselves and self-deprecate and shame ourselves even more. And we use it to shame spiral. I'm so worthless, of course. And so the real answer is that, as I go back to that comment about intimacy being intimacy, innermost, is that the first and last relationship that we need to have is with ourselves, and to understand the ways in which we justify mistreating ourselves, because those are likely the ways that we justify either the mistreatment of others or the mistreatment of others towards us. And it's almost always a reflection of some part of our inner relationship that hasn't become fully functional. We haven't developed that relationship with the masculine within us, with the yang within us, or the animus within us, as Jung would say, or we haven't developed the relationship with the anima, with the feminine, with the yin. And so we need to cultivate some component of that. And so relationships are really a mirror. And what's dysfunctional in our relationships is a mirror for something that's often dysfunctional in us. And it's a confronting thing, because then you're like, but I'm in a really dysfunctional relationship, or like all of my relationships have been challenging. It's like, all of that's me. It's like, yeah, pretty much, yeah. So we just have to come into contact with that slowly, right? So go back to those actionable things that we talked about before, and start to implement some of those pieces. And I think the real thing, as much as it's sort of cliche in some ways, is that we have to learn some quality of self-love. And this term gets thrown around like nobody's business online. I mean, it's just like grotesque to me. But I think that if I could reframe self-love, it would simply be self-acceptance, that we have to learn how to accept ourselves in our fullness as much as we possibly can, which requires us to learn how to forgive ourselves for things that we've done, or things that we've allowed, or things that have happened to us. It means that we have to learn how to integrate parts of ourselves that we maybe see as threatening or damaging or hostile, or we dislike it, like that inner critic, that voice inside that's constantly going and criticizing us, and it's contemptuous. Most people just want to kill that part off, rather than learn how to be with that part and learn how to build a relationship with it. So yeah, so that's what I would say, is that a lot of this comes back to, how do you develop a quality of self-acceptance and sovereignty within yourself? Because when you have, then you won't allow certain things to show up in your life, specifically in your relationship. Like, yeah, I'll leave that there.
Yeah, there's so much obviously to go off of from there. And
That answered so many questions I didn't even ask.
well, there's that piece you're talking about, integration work, which is such a big, just, I mean, you could just go on for, you're going to do it your whole life if you dedicate yourself to it. And we hope everybody does. We're helping people through a lot of that now with our workshop. But that piece you said about, let me see, about it wasn't the how to do the integration work. It was something about, oh darn, I lost it, guys. But there was something that was so beautiful that I wanted you to give us some sort of tangible way to start even attempting
The pendulum swinging, was that it?
No.
Yeah. Can I speak to the integration piece? Because that'd
Yeah.
be helpful for some
Yeah.
people, because I get that question all the time of like, what is integration? Like, what does that even mean? How do I integrate things? And in many ways, integration is a process of acceptance, and not just the kind of acceptance that happens on like, okay, I accept that happens. No, acceptance is a verb. It is an ongoing experience that we have to choose over and over and over and over and over again. So, for example, maybe you were in a beautiful relationship, you love the other person, they broke up with you, you didn't want the relationship to end. Acceptance isn't just on like a Saturday afternoon after a yoga class where you've like, all right, I accept that person doesn't want to be with me. You haven't dealt with the anger and the frustration and the grief of the loss of the relationship. Acceptance is a verb that you have to continue to show up to navigate through the emotional ramifications of what has taken place. So this is integration and embodiment for me are the same things. And embodiment is a process of being able to digest things intellectually and emotionally into your body, to be able to say, okay, I'm feeling grief right now. I feel sadness for the end of that relationship. Good. Be with that grief. Be with that sadness. Make space for it. It doesn't have to consume you. It doesn't have to be your entire persona, but you do have to learn how to accept the wisdom of that grief to work through you. You rejecting that grief, you rejecting that sadness or that anger is going to perpetuate it. It is going to continue to build that anger and that resentment, which you're going to bring into another relationship. So embodiment is about being present to the actual experience taking place in your body. And the simplest way to do that is by, in some ways, starting to work with and heal and recalibrate your nervous system. To know what's happening in your body is to know what's happening in your nervous system. Your nervous system is this beautiful architecture that really is the conduit to the outer world. right? To everything that you experience externally in your relationships happens through your nervous system. And so there's very basic things that you can start to learn. For example, you need to start to pay attention to when you quote unquote upregulate within a relationship. And upregulation simply means that you move into a stress response within your relationship. You move into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And when you do that, you're hijacked. And you need to start to know, excuse me, what does that feel like in my body? When I'm upregulating, when I'm anxious, what does it feel like? Where do I experience it? What's actually triggering that? What is my body trying to tell me? How do I actually invite that experience in a way where I can learn how to be with it and communicate that it's there, and communicate what maybe I might need structurally in the relationship in order to ease that anxiety, not making it the other person's responsibility, but to be able to say, this is what's happening within me. And so that's just a little piece. I could probably go further into the nervous system and the role that it plays. But in many ways, when conflict is running rampant in our relationship and we're going through the same conflict cycles over and over again, right? Like, have either of you been in a relationship where you have the same argument over and over again with your partner and you're like, this freaking argument again? Like, we've had this 100 times.
Yes.
That is a response pattern that is embedded into your nervous system that likely didn't start with that person. It might be exacerbated by that person, but it's a response pattern from your nervous system that has likely been born in your family system or in a past relationship that was abusive, or, where you got hurt in some way. And because you didn't learn how to accept and experience and process that experience, it's showing up again and again in the relationship. So getting into the body, feeling into our nervous system, feeling into what we're experiencing is an incredibly important part. And again, I think that we undervalue not only the importance of that, but the liberation and the freedom that can happen when we're able to say, oh, I can feel my nervous system upregulating. Like, I know when it's happening for me because I'm very in my body. I know what's going on in there. And I've spent a lot of time cultivating a relationship with my body, which took a long time because I I beat the shit out of my body for a long time. I misused it, drugs, alcohol, food, etc. And so sometimes that journey is a very powerful one for us to start to reconnect to our physical form and understand that there's a wisdom of our nervous system, a wisdom of the body that's trying to communicate with us.
Yeah.
I love that you must have just intuitively been sensing what I was going to ask in there, where I couldn't, where I was stumbling, because it really was about that self-acceptance piece and how to sit with the actual feeling sense. And that was what I was wondering is, do you have, and maybe even like a practice that you use to, because like it's freaking scary when you just sit with yourself and you haven't done that, especially if you're doing this for the first time or something. So is there something you can give us there?
Yeah, a few things. One, I created this practice called the fire meditation, which basically meant that, like, when I was feeling the most heat in my body, like I would be angry, that's when I would force myself to sit for at least 2 minutes, 2, 3, 5 minutes. And I would just sit with no distraction, no music, no nothing. And I would allow myself to feel like what is happening in my body right now. And I would feel into the energy. I would feel into like my hands wanting to punch through walls, my feet wanting to run, the fire that would happen in my chest. And what I started to learn was that a lot of my emotional responses had a very specific motion. So, like anger, for example, I found this to be true for a lot of men, most men, in fact. Anger, for me, I started to realize that anger moves up the body and into the head. And what I realized was that when the anger, like if the anger was underneath my collarbone, I was probably okay. If it was still in my chest, I was still in control. I was still able to communicate from a very conscious place. But as soon as that anger got up into my head, I was hijacked. I was gone. Like there was it wasn't conscious, Connor speaking anymore. It was reactive, angry, aggressive, hostile Connor. And no good deed came out of that space. So the fire meditation is a great one when you're feeling grief, when you're feeling sadness, when you're feeling anger or aggression or hostility, to go and sit in silence for a few minutes, put your hands on your body, begin to breathe, and use the breath. The breath is, I hate the word, but the breath is like a hack to get back into your nervous system. So the second tool that I'll give you is the box breath. And I use many, many, many different types of breathing styles. My degree is in music. I used to sing classical music. I used to sing opera. And so I traveled. I did a lot of time learning how to use the breath, learning how the body actually uses breath, practicing different Buddhist traditions. And the box breath is just inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. So a count of 4, right? So you can do 4 seconds and then hold and then exhale for 4 and then hold and you hold for 4. And if you do that for 4 minutes, the research shows scientifically that it resets your autonomic nervous system. And your autonomic nervous system has 2 parts, your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. And your sympathetic nervous system is like the gas pedal. That's the part responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. And your parasympathetic is like the brake pedal. And that's the part that helps you move back into calm. So 4 minutes of that box breath can help reset your autonomic nervous system from the sympathetic, from the gas pedal, from the fight, flight, or freeze back down into parasympathetic. So you can move back into a space of calm and relaxation within 4 or 5 minutes. Now, is it easy to do? Absolutely fucking not. It is so hard. It's so, especially if you're angry, right? All you want to do is like, so what I usually recommend to guys is like, do 20 burpees and then sit down for 2 to 5 minutes. Get your body going. If you're feeling a lot of fire and rage, go hit your punching bag for 10 minutes or do some push-ups or whatever it is. Then sit, use the box breath, reset the nervous system, and feel into the body. So those are just 2 tactical things that I'll give you that can help you to be with those very intense emotions, because we need to start to learn how to be with those intense emotions. Now, for people with trauma, it can be a little bit more challenging, right? If you have acute trauma and that acute trauma is being triggered, then it's a little bit different. You might want to use more like sensory based things. Like some people have an elastic band around their wrist and snap that to kind of bring them back into a sensory space. But again, the box breath is a beautiful one. I'm going to give you one more breath to use, but the box breath has been used for a long time on people, Navy SEALs, people from the military and the Army who have PTSD to reset their nervous system. So the breath is one of the single most powerful tools that most of us do not know how to use, but it is the access point to your nervous system. So the last one I'm going to give you is one that I've used for a very long time. I call it the straw breath. I don't know if it actually has a different name than that. I don't know anybody else that uses it, but it's literally like you're drinking air through a straw, and you want the inhale to be 2 to 3 times longer than the exhale. And the exhale is just like a sigh. And the exhale is meant to, like, when you let it out, it's just like you're letting all the tension out of your entire body. So and just do that for 4 or 5 minutes. And if you can do that for 4 or 5 minutes, again, what happens is that will start to reduce your heart rate. And over a couple minutes, it'll very quickly bring your heart rate down. If you're elevated, you're in a stress response, you're in an anxious response, especially, that straw breath can really help lower your heart rate, bring it back to a state of homeostasis, and then you'll be able to think, feel back into the body. And can I give you one more that's for
absolutely
couples?
Please do this.
And then the last one that I love to give couples is, you can do it clothed, you can do it, half naked, you can do it fully naked. It's however you want to do it, is to sit forehead to forehead. And you can sit facing each other first and just do some eye contact, look into each other's left eye preferably, and just breathe for, let's say, 10 to 15 breaths and just connect with one another and see if you can notice anything in the other person's eye. See if you can notice any emotions, right? The eyes are the gateway to the soul, but specifically they're the gateway to emotions. And so when I have people do this, what I always find to be astounding is how many people afterwards, just sitting for 15, 20 breaths with their partner, looking them in the eye, say, I don't know, or I can't think of the last time that we just looked at each other, that I felt so connected to you just within the span of like 45 seconds. So do that first, and then sit forehead to forehead, arms around one another. And the guys are going to put their hands, you're both going to put your hands on the back of each other's rib cage. And guys will follow, if it's a heterosexual relationship, men are going to follow the woman's breath because women have smaller lung capacities. And so if the woman tries to follow the guy, it can be uncomfortable. And so men are going to follow the women. If it's guys together, then it doesn't matter. You can follow one another. If it's women together, it doesn't matter. You can follow one another. But guys are going to follow the woman's breath, and you're just going to breathe together for 20 to 30 breaths. And what happens is after about 20 to 25 breaths, your heart rates will begin to synchronize. And so your actual pulse will begin to come into coherence together. So if you have had a stressful day, or if you've had a stressful couple days and the kids are running wild, or you felt disconnected from your partner, this is one of the simplest, easiest ways to reconnect physically from a physiological perspective and bring some coherence back into your body. Too many people, I think, are trying to pathologize their relationships. We spend so much time talking about what's happening and what's not right and what's not working, when sometimes all that we need is literal physical reconnection and to let some of that stuff go. So sit forehead to forehead, hold one another, breathe for at least 30, maybe 40 breaths, and let your heart rates synchronize. Let each other find some coherence. So I'll just leave that one there for the
My
couples.
boyfriend's led me through that a couple of times, followed by the best sex ever. So he must have gotten that from you. And at first it was like weird, like you said, it was a little weird, like the forehead to forehead, like the first time. But after experiencing what came next, it was always very exciting to do again. And the box breathing, I've known of for a long time, but I didn't know the extreme benefits of that. Complex PTSD is something that I've been struggling with for a huge part of my life. So I'm really thankful to hear the benefits of that.
What stuck out to me was giving permission to men especially, but just generally people, to burn off some of that energy before even trying to settle down into a place where you can even think about doing the breathing thing. Because yeah, I can see, for so many people, I mean, women and men experience it differently. Like men, it might be more of like rage, wanting to hit something. I know that is for women as well, sometimes as well. And for women, we get into this, we're too busy to like slow down and figure this out right now. We have all these things, we got this long list of whatever we're doing. And so that all that energy though, whether it's just, you're going to disguise it as being busyness energy or it's rage, whatever you see it as, give it a burn off, like go outside and sprint. I love that. Go outside and do some burpees or whatever it is, and then come back and do the breathing and get in touch with the feeling sense. That was key. I love that. Thanks for that.
We do have one more question before the lightning round ending of the show, if you have time. Do you have time? Yeah, about men meeting their edge.
Yeah. So Jade basically said it there, but I just want to know, really, we talk about edge meeting or like getting beyond your edge with men, or whoever's listening here who might have read like The Way of the Superior Man by David Data, this type of thing, where we want to find our edge and then push past it in order to grow and expand. So we understand that idea, but what is it? Maybe you can discuss with us how men can meet their edge in a healthy way, because I know this can get
most men I know are like risking their lives. So.
Which I think there is some of that needed to some degree. Like there has to be that on the line.
Not when you're a father.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that will, I will forever push my edge even as a dad. Like I have a good saying with my new son, who's only like 9 weeks old, which I got from a mentor of mine. He said, I would take a bullet for my kids. I would die for my kids, but I'll never live for them. And I think that stays very true for me. Part of our role, I believe, as fathers is, a lot of the research shows that our role as fathers is to be not risk avoidant, but actually risk granters, to be able to encourage our kids in some ways to take small, smart risks, not dumb risks, like don't go jump off that cliff or try and jump off the bridge, but to take some small risks as a means of knowing, again, the edge of the structure. Where are the edges of the parameters? And so is the question, why do men like to push their edge, or just to speak
how can they push their edge in a way that is healthy for them? Because sometimes also pushing your edge can turn into an addiction.
Sadist,
like an adrenaline addiction almost.
Yeah. So there are many forms of how we deal with trauma, and there are many forms of how we deal with our wounds and our pain. And so many men who are seeking sometimes these very extreme versions of pushing their edge, it's because they're accentualizing their wounding. They're trying to figure out what to do with the energy of pain within them that they've repressed. And that pain is driving them to pursue more dangerous, more excessive experiences that maybe will bring them into contact with a kind of experience that will push them past the edge and cause them to experience the space of enoughness. Like, that's enough. There's no more outside of that. So that's a part of it. There's a spiritual part of it, I think, where some men are trying to test God in a way. They don't have a relationship with anything spiritually, which is fine. There's, if you're an atheist, that's totally fine, doesn't matter. But for many guys, they're trying to find some form of spiritual intervention. And it's almost like a means of testing the universe or life or God or whatever label you want to put on that, as a means of being like, come stop me, prevent me from doing this. I fucking dare you. And again, it comes from oftentimes that pain within that they haven't been able to connect to, but it's sort of pushing them outside of their comfort zone and into the world in a way that hopefully will lead them to an understanding of why that thing happened, why that abuse happened, or that trauma happened, or that neglect, or that abandonment, or whatever it is that they're trying to unconsciously digest or process. So that's generally why a lot of men seek these very dangerous edges. Like, I have no desire for that anymore, but I understand it because I did it. And how I did it was, I had a 1,000cc motorcycle, and it did 320 kilometers an hour, and I tested to see how fast it would go on multiple occasions. As often as I could, I would run from the cops, I would stunt it, I would street race it, I would tear through the streets just endlessly. And part of that was because I really was trying to figure something out internally. And there was a part of me that wanted to sort of see, like, how far can I push the boundary before something or someone intervenes and stops me. And it's a form of adolescent masculinity that is out of control because it's never been initiated into that more mature masculine. And so it's a part of us as men, and this is maybe really important, that is trying to meet death. And that might seem esoteric or existential in a way, but what's happening is that when we as men are initiated, we meet death. If you look at every single male initiation process, it involves some form of encounter with death, some form of an understanding that death is very real. And so for many men, they negate or pretend like that fact isn't true. And so they're sort of pushing that edge to be like, where are you, death? Like, where are you? So I'll leave that there. How we actually can pursue a more integrated, embodied version of pushing our edge is by being ruthlessly curious about what we are capable of. What am I capable of as a man or as a woman? But we're talking about men. What am I capable of as a man? What am I capable of physically? What am I capable of intellectually? What am I capable of sexually within my relationship, or just relationally? What am I capable of within my friendships, within my society? And in that pursuit, we can begin to see what our edge is. Because for me, the edge is about the very end of our capacities, the very edge of our capabilities, right? The last burpee that you can possibly get out, or the how much you can put on the bench press or on the squat rack on the one squat or the one bench press that you're just trying to see how much can I actually lift, or how much time can I shave off of the racetrack, or whatever the example is. And so really, for men, meeting our edge in a healthy way is about not running away from something, not running towards something, but about discovering our own capacities as a man in the different areas of our life. Because the edge shows the parameters between what's known and the mysterious and the unknown. And for us as men, what's beautiful about meeting our edge is that it puts us oftentimes into a space of awe and wonderment, right? Because we meet the mysterious, we meet the sort of numinous space of existence, and we can be like, wow, That's incredible. I don't know what's beyond that. I don't know even how to go beyond that. I don't know how to push myself any further than that, but holy fuck, what a journey it was to just get here to this place in my life, to have honed this capacity and this skill set is such a beautiful endeavor and journey. And so that's how we as men can undertake that. But I would say that it often cannot be done in ignorance of our pain. It cannot be done because of our pain, and it cannot certainly be done in ignorance of our pain. We have to do that with our pain, our suffering in some way in tow, that we are cultivating some form of a relationship with our pain. Like, I'm writing a book right now, and it's for men, and the very first line of the book is, "A man's work begins in pain." That is where every man's journey begins. And if he ignores it, his pain will find him. And that's why so many men are seeking these very massive, sort of reckless experiences, because they're looking for the rock bottom so that they can begin that journey with their pain, but they can kickstart it now by actually addressing it.
Yeah.
That's so huge. It makes me think of it. You brought up Jung and the idea of the daemon, this part of you that's calling you to go and seek it out. Essentially, it's your soul's journey and your purpose. And that's a really, it feels like you're almost describing purpose when you're describing like how you go about this journey and just touching that presence of God, and being able to, and then you're like, oh yeah, this life did make sense because I got to do all that. I got to see that in myself.
I can't wait for your book to come out.
I know.
It made me think of Mercedes and I were ring girls for years together before we had a podcast. And it just made me think about how some people turn that into their career. And I dated quite a few fighters as well. And when I would ask them, like, well, what would you do if you weren't a fighter? I kid you not, every one of them said, a professional bull rider. So it's like they were really after,
yeah.
And I almost like wished we could play this little section of the podcast in the fight venue before, whatever next big McGregor fight or something, and just watch everybody's faces and reactions.
It's funny. I just posted a little meme on my Instagram today, and it was like women. What guys really want, it's like something about like what guys ultimately want is like just discussing, right? Like implying that guys just want sex. And then it was like what guys actually want. And there was just a picture of a UFC fighter with the championship belt.
Yeah.
Right? It's like what we actually want is just the title. We just want the
Yeah,
belt.
that's really funny.
Yeah, so good. Well, and some, some guys, that is a huge part of their persona. It's their identity. And so to pursue anything other than the sort of fringes and the extremes, it seems counter to their nature, so that might actually be a very intrinsic part of their nature. And that's not bad or wrong. It simply means that they need to learn how to curate a bit of responsibility with it, a bit of understanding with it, because in truth, I mean, men pushing their edges in extreme ways has done some incredible things for humanity.
Yeah.
Like in all seriousness and all realness. And so there is a function to it. There is a purpose to it. However, there are many men who are not pursuing that edge and those extreme experiences out of a very conscious place. It's from an unconscious avoidance. And so that's the distinction, is that we need to be aware of, am I trying to avoid something? Am I trying to avoid my pain? Am I trying to prove something to somebody? Is this extreme sport just a big fuck you to my dad or a big fuck you to my mom? Or is this actually something that like I live and breathe? This is legitimately in my veins. I want to go and punch people in the face for a living because I want to see what I'm capable of physically. Can I be the strongest, the fastest, the most hard-hitting man on the planet? Can I do that? And it's a very interesting endeavor, but we'll leave that there.
Yeah. And it's like you see all the beautiful ways, like you said, it's moved us along. And then the other ways where for some reason, like what comes to mind is almost like a porn addiction, where it's like, we want to see more, we want to see the worst possible thing, like getting to these grotesque things. And it's also an edge.
Yes.
Like, how much can I be turned on by? Like what can I get into as far as my depths go and my shadows go there? And it is a sense of trying to find our edge, and we can make that criminal or not,
Right.
But just fascinating.
Well, again, I think that that's like sexualizing the wounding, right?
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of, not to like yuck people's yum, because everybody has certain things, but a lot of people, they sexualize their pain. And so rather than knowing what to do with it, their pain takes over and it becomes a fantasy or a fetish. And they look for experiences where they can relive or reenact or re-experience that pain in some way, usually in an unconscious way. And again, it's not right or wrong. It's just what's happening, and whether or not we want that to be our experience. But I did want to share one last quote, because I feel like it's applicable, and it's Carl Jung again, where he said, if you ever have the rare opportunity to speak with the devil, do not forget to confront him in all seriousness. He is your devil after all. The devil is the adversary. The devil is the adversary of your own other standpoint. He tests you and sets a stone in your path where you least want it. So that's from Carl Jung's Red Book, where he talked about a dream where he actually met the devil. And he talks about the elusiveness of the devil and how he knew that there was something sort of malevolent and dark about this figure that he was interacting with. But there was almost like this excitement about getting the opportunity to speak with his version of his own devil. And I think that for many of us as men, we have been taught that there's strength in suppression, that there's strength in avoidance, and it robs us of the opportunity to meet our own devil, right? To meet our own darkness, to understand our own shadow, which brings a more complete understanding of our existence and gives us more meaning in life and helps us understand why we're here and what we're supposed to do and all of those pieces. And so, but we've been taught to avoid some of those parts. Like there's something wrong with us if we start to explore them. But it is an essential aspect of men's maturation.
Oh,
Yeah, so many people are so afraid though when they meet that devil that the devil will possess them.
yeah.
Right.
I know
It's external.
Tom, before starting men's work, one of his nervousness around how much work I do is he told me I was like going to become Darth Vader, how like Darth Vader was like always trying to be like, I've not seen the movie, but he like grows and grows and grows. And then I don't know, he becomes this Darth Vader. But I told him, again, I haven't seen the movie, but I was like, no, because I'm in my heart. But I know that was his big nervousness, is that like it can possess you.
Yeah, I think that's a nervousness for a lot of people, is this evil thing. And I'll say from my personal experience, I got way too high once, and you'll know why this is the last time I ever got high after I tell the story. But I basically met my devil in there and we sword fought, which is interesting. I don't know how to sword fight. I have never fenced in my life. And it was, at the time, I wasn't in any of this work. I wasn't doing any of my own work, but it was so frightening for me. It felt like this use of this drug, for instance, was a portal to turning on essentially the demons, inside of me, or however you want to look at it. When you're not thinking about it as it lives inside of you, then you just say, I'm not going to do this thing anymore because it causes, demons to attack me, right? And that's the way to look at it from an external sense, coming at you and life is happening to you, right? But now I have a much different sense. I've obviously explored my own psyche quite a bit and done a lot of my own shadow work and met these parts of my shadows, my devils, and been able to recognize that, oh, like that was my own demons, my own dragons that I was attempting to slay in a very sloppy way in this situation. But now I have tools to be able to not slay them even, but to just invite them in as part of me and finally integrate them in a way that's like, we can do this together, because actually I need you sometimes, I need you to come online and speak through me when I need that type of defensiveness or whatever it is that I need in order to protect myself. So it's just really beautiful to have this kind of like full circle, and this conversation with you that brings that really full circle for me as well. So
beautiful. It's beautiful. It's like that's a spiritual experience in its own way. It's maybe not the like light and love and doves and rainbows that we normally think of as spiritual experience, but in many ways we do have those components living within us, and so to come into contact with them is a wonderful experience, although it can be quite disorienting, and there is the chance of, if not done in the right way, or if not tended to, we can move into that space of psychosis, right? We can move into, it's a very interesting thing, right? There's a very fine line between sanity and shamanism, and that fine line is usually schizophrenia, right?
Yep.
And so we can move into that shamanic space. But it sounds like you had a kind of spiritual experience. And did somebody win the
I wish I could have seen
the
it at the
fight
time like that? Yeah.
Did somebody win the fight, or how did the fight end?
no, I needed to distract myself from it. It was so frightening, to be in this inner body experience, I'll call it, because it was really internal. I wasn't having a vision outside. It was like when I would close my eyes, I could see the thing happening as a vision, but I didn't have the tools, of course, but I also didn't have a shaman or someone sitting with me. It's just my own recreational thing. And I wasn't going into it with any intention of having a spiritual experience. So I 100% agree. And by the way, anyone listening, I'm not recommending getting so high that you meet your own devil.
I know. Yeah. I think I would have maybe been possessed or had re-traumatization at those times that I met my own devil, had I not had a safe container with a shaman or a mental health expert, or even if I was doing it on my own and in my own setting, just someone who I could go to for support. So I think that's where there's that big difference of that devil being able to possess you and you being able to just see yourself in that devil. And I don't want to say conquer it, but what Jung said.
I think it ties into what we were talking about before about meeting your edge. You have to know, in some ways, we have to really be honest and truthful with ourselves in a sort of radical honesty or like ruthful honesty way to say, again, what is the structure that I need in order to explore my edge? Maybe you're somebody who's okay to drop 5 grams of mushrooms at home on the floor, with an audio track and go for a ride. But maybe the thought of that sends you, even just the thought of that gives you a massive amount of anxiety. Great. Then your edge is to have somebody within that experience with you, right? To ensure that when you are going to meet the sort of, darker part of you, the shadow within you, that it's not something that's going to consume you, right? I mean, the perfect example is like Fight Club. You have the narrator's character who creates Tyler Durden, Brad Pitt's character. His shadow literally gets externalized and he has a psychotic break, and he creates
that movie that way.
Yeah, he creates this whole other character, and it's literally his shadow. It's the physical embodiment and manifestation of his shadow. And so, we have, when we are dealing with facing our own darkness and understanding our pain and beginning to do some of this deeper work, we have a responsibility to do it in a manner that is going to allow us to produce the most fruitful results, because in some ways you're playing with fire, right? And I think Terence McKenna would have said something along those lines, right? You're playing with fire, and so you best learn how to wield or work with fire so that you don't get consumed by it, because that is a very likely possibility, right? Maybe not likely, but it is possible. And so we have a responsibility, whether it's psychedelics, whether it's shadow work, whether it's you're smoking DMT or whatever it is in a ceremonial perspective, to find places and spaces where you can do those things and feel safe and nurtured and taken care of. And that's the same with therapy. Like, stop fucking going to therapists that you don't trust and you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on, or whatever, however much money it is, and go see them every single week, and you don't actually open up to them. I see people all the time. I've worked with people that have come to me, and like in the first 2 sessions, they're like, I got more out of this than the therapist that I worked with for 5 years. And it's like, what were you doing?
I think he got more out of the questions you ask in men's group than he had with his therapist in years also. So, and I don't know that it's that he didn't trust her. I think that it, may have been the work that you've put in, maybe, I'm not sure, but.
And you're a man. That's a huge thing.
A huge thing. Yeah.
Yeah. That reverence, though, of whatever therapeutic you're going to enter, whether plant medicine or otherwise, is so important for sure.
So
all right. You have
questions.
So much beautiful time with us, Connor. Thank you. And I want to just jump through our lightning round questions with you real quickly. So first off, if you could hug your younger self right now, what would you say?
Let's go play in the garden. Let's go dig up the garden. I used to go play in the garden all the time.
How old were you?
Oh man, I mean, probably like 2 until I was 12. I would just go play in the dirt. Let's just go play in the dirt. That's probably what it would be. Let's just get down into our underwear and go dig around the dirt.
That sounds like my son. If you could have the whole world read one book, which would it be?
Oh, probably Probably The Wisdom of Insecurities by Alan Watts, or Awareness by Anthony DeMello. It's a toss-up between the two.
The Wisdom of Insecurities, or what was the second one?
Awareness by
Awareness.
Anthony DeMello. Yeah.
Anthony DeMello. I haven't heard of that one.
If you could whisper one phrase to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
There's no one phrase. The Tao that's called the Tao is not the Tao.
I just heard that saying like 2 days ago. That felt, for a second, I was like, it weirded me out. How can people connect with you and get involved in the work that you do?
Probably the easiest way is just through Instagram. I'm on Instagram all the time. It's at ManTalks, and then just through the website, mantalks.com or connorbeaton.com. Those are the best avenues to come and check me out.
Yeah. And again, you can join his men's group from anywhere because it's on
virtual.
I'm not sure what your setting is, but yeah. Virtual. So, and then thank you so much for spending so much time with us. I know you have a 9-week-old, so this was a lot to ask from you, but we'll turn it into 2 episodes and it'll be such a blessing. We've done over 100 episodes, and this is probably in my top 5 favorites, and I couldn't choose a better mentor for my boyfriend. So thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, and such great questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for being a light.
What is your magic trick today?
Oh, my magic trick. Okay. So this is coming from the account I love. I think you follow her as well, Britt Frank on Instagram. And this one is where she says, regulate your nervous system by using your name instead of I. So, most of us, we have thoughts like, why did I say that? Like, why did I think that? Why did I do that? I'm so stressed. I'm so overwhelmed, right? And she says that when we use the I word to talk to ourselves, we tend to blend our stressors. Like we tend to like blend with our stressors. We literally become them in a sense, and that can make matters worse. So instead, she says to use your name if you can, or your pronouns, or the word you when you talk to yourself. And that would actually create space so that you can pause and respond rather than immediately react. So when you're identifying with the stressor with the word I, you're getting into that reactionary state that's just doesn't give you any space to have a responsible response. So using your name. So for instance, it would be like, Mercedes, this is me talking to myself here. Mercedes, I noticed you just said blah, 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 whatever it is. Or there's a part inside me, she's thinking, da, da, da. So obviously you see how it's like creating space, right? Or, hi, I noticed you just did blank, whatever it is. Or Mercedes, I know you're stressed, blah, blah, blah. Or, wow, she's really overwhelmed. Talking to myself, right? She's really overwhelmed, whatever my pronoun is. And my pronoun is she. So that gives you that kind of obvious space enough to allow you the distance to look at it almost like you're in a way disidentifying with the stressor completely, which kind of sounds like you have multiple personality disorder. But if you've listened to our podcast long enough, you probably know that we kind of we always are asking you to do that and separate yourself from the different parts of your psyche so you can look at them more responsibly. And so that is obviously going to feel a little bit weird while you're doing it. So know that that is going to be a strange practice at first, but it's really a trick to replace the voice that's this relentless inner critic with a compassionate inner parent so that we can then begin reparenting ourselves. And she also gives a disclaimer. She says, some people use third person language to distance themselves from their fuckery. Like, I didn't do it, she did it. Or she says, yeah, that's a good example. I didn't do it, she did it. Like, who did it? So no, that's not what this is about. This is about the ways in which you parent yourself and have the inner conversation in a way that can be more responsible instead of reactive. So you're not always being that inner critic. And, like what Connor was saying today, you're not always sabotaging yourself and talking down to yourself. Instead, you're giving yourself that self-love and then moreover, the self-acceptance you need in order to actually make meaningful change. Yeah. That's my magic. What's yours today?
Mine is from Connor, and it's questions to help you access the shadow. So basically how to come into contact with our unconscious parts. And there's just 6 questions that you can use for journaling, or you can just answer them, as you hear them. They are, what do I reject? How do I hide? What boundaries do I set and why? How do I show up in relationships? Where do I feel like I'm not good enough? And lastly, where do I feel that I'm unlovable? So those are 6 questions you can ask to access your shadow.
Cool. I like that.
All right, Magic Mobbers, thank you so much for tuning in and taking this journey with us. If this episode held some magic for you, please share it with your friends and family. This would mean so much to us. And don't forget to join us on our Instagram page at The Magic Hour and let us know what your favorite episodes have been so far. We appreciate all of your feedback and would love to know what's lighting you up.
We'll meet you there. Until then, be a
Be a
light.
light.